All right, calling the meeting to order at 6:10. Has there been a declaration of public notice? All right, can I have a motion, please?
So, I, Andrew McKinney, 4574 American Way, Cottage Grove, move to nominate Maureen Gage to serve as chairperson of the 2022 Monona Grove School District Annual Meeting and Budget Hearing.
Yes, second. All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion is carried. All right, minutes of the 2021 annual meeting are located in the packet. And next is the superintendent's report. Dan.
Hey, I'd like to begin by talking about the beginning of our school year. We've got so much to celebrate in our district and it relates to the success in our schools. Today is our 7th day of school, and as we have an opportunity to visit the school, to meet with the principals and talk to the teachers, it's been an unbelievably positive start to the school year. In fact, many of our administrators have reported that this year has been the most positive start in their careers. And one example is at our Granite Ridge School, which opened a year ago. And of course, we've had some challenges with regard to the pandemic the last couple of years and some limiting some of the activities. And I think one of the highlights was that Granite Ridge held their first assembly ever in the building. And it was such a treat to hear about how that assembly went, and having all the students in grade 3 through 5 participate enthusiastically. And again, it's just been an unbelievably positive start to the school year. What I'd like to talk about a little bit more tonight is, in my report, is kind of the state of education in Wisconsin and some of the challenges that we're facing as a public school district. We're going to have a budget hearing coming up shortly, and our Business Services Director, Mark Powell, will speak specifically to our budget here at Monona Grove. But to provide a little bit of context, we're looking at statewide. We know that the state's commitment to funding in Wisconsin public schools has really shifted dramatically over the last 2 decades. Back in 2002, Wisconsin was ranked 11th in the nation in school funding. And in 2020, that had dipped to 25th. That's the largest drop in the national ranking of any state over that time period. And Wisconsin public school funding is now about 6% below the national average. And so how does that affect us in our schools, not only in Monona Grove, but statewide? Well, cuts to state funding, and especially in the formula funding, generally force local school districts to scale back educational services or raise more revenue to cover the gap, or both. And specifically, the responsibility of funding oftentimes shifts then from the state to our local property taxpayers. And as you'll see in the budget report that comes up here in a little bit, we are now entering our 2nd year of a $0 increase to per pupil funding from the state. Okay, I want to repeat that, $0 per pupil. And with high inflation rates, we have a lot of uncontrollable costs in utilities and transportation, and our challenges with staffing and the competitive field and retaining our educators. It really makes it a challenge for school districts to survive without that additional funding. Now, we know that we are receiving some one-time federal funding that is meant to help cover the expenses and the challenge that we faced due to the pandemic. But in our state legislature, their decision to give us a $0 increase, really the solution was to use the federal funding to balance our budget and these gaps. And again, that was really meant to be one-time funding. But I will say that when we look specifically at Monona Grove and what we have done with our budget, we have put $1.9 million over the last couple of years in specifically to teacher compensation, which we know is one of the most important things that we can do as a district, is to have quality staff, and that's a really important part of our budget. And so we've worked really hard to bring our employee compensation up to the market. And we know we're competing not only with other school districts, but the private sector as well. And so using these one-time funds for things that are recurring is really makes it a challenge for us. Now with that, there were a number of positive things we were able to use those one-time funds for. We talked about our student services, who directly support our students, our health team, building substitutes are all really important staffing things that we were able to increase with the one-time federal funding. But as we continue then to build on this great tradition of outstanding education in our state, we certainly remain committed to making the most of every single taxpayer dollar that's invested in our schools, and whether that investment is made at the state or local level. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Director of Business Services, Mark Powell, who will speak specific to our budget here at Monona Grove.
Just aim it anywhere. All righty. Good evening. I'm going to talk about the 22-23 budget. Before that, though, if in the packet you look, and it's part of the agenda, is on page 10 and 11 is our year-to-date revenues and expenditures for the 21-22 school year. We have just started our audit process, so those are not final numbers. We will have final numbers to present to the board either in January or February. So as far as the budget overview and how the budget was built, this process began in January when Jared was here. As has been done in the past, it's a zero-based budgeting process. We started zero with a lot of the line items in the budget. As Dan alluded to, there has been no increase from the state in the revenue limit per pupil amount or the per pupil aid amount, which is off. It's kind of aside from our revenue limit calculation that the state has been funding over the last 5 or 6 years. The budget was built on using our available ESSER $3, approved wages, as Dan talked about, increases for staff. The proposed levy is $20,950,802, which is a almost 6% decrease from the prior year. This is a result of some increased aid that we're getting from the district that was higher than what was originally projected. Just a quick overview of school funding, as Dan talked about. Basically, our two sets of funding mechanisms, the biggest one are from the state and from local, which is the taxpayers, and then the state aid from the state of Wisconsin. And those work inverse of each other. So if one goes up, the other one goes down. And as was kind of alluded to before, when I said the 6% decrease is because we are getting more funding, so that lowers the tax levy for the taxpayers of the district. Revenue limits were established in '93, and as everyone knows, it's a combination of the levy and state aid and some other, funding things like school choice and what have you. But basically, it's based on a 3-year rolling average of students, and again, no increase for this current year on the per pupil allocation. As we've talked about aid, here are the two main sources of aid that we get. The equalization aid, which is basically based on your property in the district. If you're considered property rich, you get less aid, and there's 3 levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And a lot of times tertiary, if you have a lot of property, takes away money from the district. So we have a negative aid of about $900,000 projected for this year. It's all part of the formula. And then the per pupil aid, you can see that it was increasing over the last couple of years, and then this will be the 3rd year that it's frozen at $742. What has our enrollment been doing over the past few years? This is bodies in the seat. This is not FTEs, because we have a significant positive balance between open enrollment. So this includes the open enrollment kids coming in. So we're looking at currently, the last time I looked was about 3557. As you can see, it's kind of been going up and down a little bit, but last couple of years it's been increasing. So this is projection of our general fund budget. You can see the two prior years, one audited, one unaudited, and then what is being projected for 22-23. The expenses will be more than the revenue at this time by about $800,000, and it's close to what Jared had presented, just been updated with a few numbers, but right now we're looking at a deficit of about $800,000. That information's on page 12 of the packet if you wanted to look at it more detail. This kind of breaks out our revenues and where we get the revenues from. This year projecting, because of the increase in state aid, about almost an equal balance between taxes and state revenue. The other major revenue is the 9% that you see from other districts, which is the open enrollment that we received. We received about 9,800 per kid, 9,822 I think it is. And then this is a breakdown of our expenditures. This is just Fund 10. So about 68% of our expenses are salaries and benefits, as you can see how it's broken down there. The next couple slides are just breaking down our individual funds, and I'll just go through real quick and indicate what each one of them is for. And you can see at the bottom it tells you what page they are on in the packet if you want to look at more detail at some point. But the Fund 21 and Fund 27 are special projects funds. This is 21 is gifts, student activities, donations, fundraising that the activities do. Also, it's our special ed fund, which is the biggest part of it. And you can see that on the bottom there, it's almost about 95% of the cost, revenues and expenditures that we have for our special ed program, with about $4.6 million coming from a transfer from the general fund. Next is our debt service. This is a combination of referendum money and money that was borrowed that was not part of a approved referendum. And you can see it's gone down significantly over the last couple of years. The past 2 years we had refinancing that we did, so that was a savings to the taxpayers on being able to refinance higher interest rates. And so that's why it's kind of a sliding scale down there. But the $6 billion for both of those funds is representative of what we will continue to pay here in the next few years. And if you look on page, I don't have it. Anyway, there's a page after this in the packet that lists our debt service schedule over the next 15 years, I believe it is, or 17 years for both referendum debt and non-referendum debt. Fund 40 is where we spend out for the capital projects, both the referendum and non-referendum. And you can see we've been dwindling that down as the project has been completed over the last few years. And as of June 30, we had about $2.7 million left for projects, but I don't believe any of the solar expenses have been paid out of there. So that's kind of where we were June 30 before we had those costs associated with it, and some of our energy efficiency monies as well. Food service, self-explanatory. This is our, we've got a lot of extra revenue from the feds over the last couple of years because of COVID. So that's helped build up our fund balance. And so we'll deal with that as we go forward, hopefully reinvest some of it back into the program and upgrading our equipment. And DPI doesn't like to have a big fund balance in food service. So we'll have to make some adjustments to that. But anyway. Last fund is Fund 80, Community Services. The main three things out of here are the aquatics program, a pool, auditorium, and then also our summer camps that we run. So we do have a levy to that, about $700,000, but other than that, it's funded by fees that we collect for the different programs. So this is kind of a summary of the overall expenditures and tax levy over the last couple of years. This page shows the total expenditures, and obviously we had a lot of refinancing. We had a lot of the Fund 40 monies that were spent, so that's kind of why the totals are decreasing at a rather great rate. So because we have expended that money in the capital projects. So if you look this year compared to all funds, we're having a 5.63% reduction in overall expenditures for the entire district. The next page shows the levy. As you can see, We're going down again because, as I said, the state aid was significantly more than initially projected. And so we have our Fund 10, our two debt service funds, and then our community services fund, which I indicated before. So overall, it's almost a 6% decrease in our overall levy. Here's a mill rate history that we've had. You can see it's coming down from 1151, I believe, to 1005. That's based on 8% increase in EAV, which is the equalized value that we initially got from the state. So that'll be adjusted a little bit as we go forward. We got our final numbers in the beginning of October from the DOR, but it should be pretty close to that. As I just said, some of this might be subject to change. We have our third Friday count this Friday, which will determine our revenue limit and our funding. The certification of the equalized value will be October 1st, and then the certification of our state aid, which will determine the final revenue limit, will be on 10/15. And then after that, then at the last board meeting in October, the board will approve a final levy and budget. So that's kind of where we are going forward, and entertain any questions from anybody. Not all at once. Okay. You want me to flip? I can do it. Or you can do it. I guess you're the chair. You can do it. Okay.
All right, and so we're doing a motion for the tax levy. Have a motion, please.
I, Andrew McKinney, of 4574 American Way, Cottage Grove, move approval of a 2022-2023 tax levy in the total amount of $27,950,802.
All right, can I have a second? All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, motion is carried. Next is the motion for salaries for school board members.
I, Reed Foster of 3011 Red Hawk Trail in Cottage Grove, move to set the 2022-2023 annual salaries of the school board members at $3,700.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion is carried. All right, next is the motion for reimbursement of school board member related expenditures.
I, Reed Foster of 3011 Red Hawk Trail, move to authorize the reimbursement of school board members for expenses incurred in the performance of their duties.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion is carried. Next is the authorization, the motion for authorization of school board to establish the date and time.
I, Reed Foster of 3011 Red Hawk Trail, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, move to authorize the school board to establish the date, time, and place of their 2023 annual meeting and budget hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion is carried. All right, and other business? There's no other business, and a motion for adjournment.
I, Andrew McKinney, 4574 American Way, Cottage Grove, move that the meeting be adjourned.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Motion is carried. Meeting's adjourned.
Or first?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I wasn't as crazy now. It was just like,